Many Easter eggs in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania reference previous Ant-Man films, the MCU as a whole, and Marvel Comics. As Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly's first theatrical appearance as Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne since Avengers Endgame, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania celebrates the titular hero's Marvel Studios history while also setting up the MCU's future.
He Who Remains was the first Kong variant that Jonathan Majors portrayed in the MCU, debuting in Phase 4's Loki Season 1. Audiences can again catch a glimpse of He Who Remains in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's Marvel Studios logo sequence at the beginning of the film. Interestingly, this marks the first time a villain has been featured in this sequence, providing a small tease at the official debut of Kong the Conqueror during the film.
Both Ant-Man and the Wasp dealt with Janet Van Dyne's disappearance into the quantum realm. According to Janet Van Dyne, the MCU's original Wasp, there was nobody else in the quantum realm during the 30 years she was trapped there. Michelle Pfeiffer's return in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania comes with a retcon, revealing that Janet was lying, and that there were entire societies in the quantum realm consisting of sentient beings. One of those was Kong the Conqueror, who had seemingly crashed in the quantum realm just like Janet.
In 2015's Ant-Man, Hank Pym originally planned to pass his company on to his protege Darren Cross, with Hope Van Dyne, his daughter, cast to the side. However, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania revealed that Hope had inherited the family business, with the newly dubbed Pym Van Dyne now using Pym particles to help the world. While this is a great development for Evangeline Lilly's character, it could also tease her future as the Red Queen, the villain who Hope becomes in Marvel Comics.
Paul Rudd's Scott Lang did not appear in any live-action MCU Phase 4 release, but Ant-Man was still referenced a few times. Rogers, the musical, first seen in Hawkeye, surprisingly included Ant-Man as a hero during the Battle of New York. Ms. Marvel then revealed that Scott Lang now had a podcast after saving the world in Avengers Endgame. Meanwhile, Scott Lang's book, Look Out for the Little Guy, appeared among Black Panther, Wakanda Forever's Easter eggs. Now, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania confirms that Ant-Man is indeed a celebrity.
Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is full of callbacks to the original Ant-Man film, released in 2015, including an appearance of the Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop Scott briefly worked in after being released from prison. This time, Scott returned as a celebrity, visiting the Baskin-Robbins shop as Ant-Man, which is curious given that Scott had been fired from the job after the management found out he had served time in prison. Greg Turkington, who played Scott's boss in Ant-Man, returned for a cameo in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania.
Randall Park is also part of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's cast, returning as Jimmy Woo after debuting as the character in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Woo was the assigned FBI agent responsible for keeping an eye on Scott Lang during his house arrest. After Captain America Civil War, Randall Park reprised his role of Jimmy Woo in WandaVision, in which the character, along with Monica Rambeau and Darcy Lewis, helped to figure out the complexities of the Scarlet Witch's Westview hex. Jimmy Woo appears in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, having lunch with Scott Lang, which the pair joked about in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Paul Rudd's introduction as Scott Lang in 2015's Ant-Man saw the character moments from being released from prison. In Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Cassie Lang's first scene plays out similarly. Cassie was arrested after trying to help a settlement of people who had lost their homes after the 5-year blip, and while Scott and Hope were not necessarily mad at her, they did have to bail Cassie out of jail. As such, Cassie Lang's Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania journey starts out by mirroring her father's original MCU story.
Cassie Lang's introduction in jail in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania proves that the blip and its aftereffects are still a major narrative for the MCU, as she was arrested for helping those displaced by the blip. Thanos' snap in Avengers Infinity War sent the universe into 5 years of turmoil, but it could be argued that the Hulk's snap in Avengers Endgame did the same, as he brought everyone back after the world had all but recovered. Thousands of people would have been left homeless, as proven by the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, so the blip is still a huge MCU event.
The final battle of 2015's Ant-Man is one of the most unique fights in the MCU to date, and Cassie Lang recalls it during her opening moments of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. When Scott tells Cassie that he wants her to have a normal life, Cassie points out that Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jacket, tried to kill her when she was 6, though she was actually 8 during the first film. In addition to being an Ant-Man callback, Cassie Lang recalling that B-Guy was a setup for Darren Cross's return as Modok in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania.
During Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, the events of Captain America, Civil War are recalled. When it's mentioned how Scott Lang fought Captain America, Scott makes a point of correcting the statement, noting how he fought with Captain America during the Avengers battle in Germany. According to Scott Lang, nobody would want to fight Captain America, perhaps referencing how Steve Rogers managed to beat even Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, during the pair's final battle in Siberia.
One of the MCU's many running gags is that Ant-Man and Spider-Man constantly get compared, since both their names from insects. Ruben Rabasa appears as a coffee shop owner in the opening moments of Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and states to Scott Lang that he is the hero's biggest fan. Even so, he still refers to Scott as Spider-Man as he leaves the shop, though Scott thankfully gets his coffee for free thanks to his heroism.
During the opening montage of Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Scott Lang walks joyfully down the street and passes many who recognize him as a prominent superhero. One fan, a kid, is shown owning an Ant-Man backpack, which uses art taken from the real-world promotional material of 2015's Ant-Man. This trick has been pulled before, as Avengers: Infinity War used a photo of the real-world Robert Downey Jr. to portray Tony Stark.
Scott Lang's book, Look Out for the Little Guy, which he listens to in his car when bringing Cassie home from jail at the beginning of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, references Avengers Endgame's difficult time travel technology tests. Scott recalls how the Hulk turned him into a baby, a consequence of the non-blipped Avengers trying to create a time machine without Tony Stark's help. Scott questions himself if he was Hulk's baby, in a hilarious moment.
During Avengers Endgame, Scott Lang referenced 1985's Back to the Future multiple times while discussing the concept of time travel with the other Avengers. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania includes a brilliant reference to the classic film, as during Back to the Future, a dehydrated pizza is cooked in seconds. And a similar thing occurs when Hank drops a few Pym particles on a tiny pizza in Quantumania. The pizza sizes up almost instantly, forming a much larger pizza that the Lang-Pym Van Dyne family sits down to eat together.
Bill Murray plays Lord Kryler in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, one of Janet Van Dyne's friends from her time trapped in the quantum realm. Kryler was a freedom fighter that originally helped Janet protect the quantum realm from Kong the Conqueror, though has since fallen into the villain's employ. In Marvel Comics, Kryler lived in the subatomic world of Kai, although the character himself wasn't too important and died almost immediately.
David Dastmalchian previously portrayed Kurt in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but returns in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania as a completely different character. Dastmalchian voiced Veb, the creature without holes, from the quantum realm who Scott and Cassie meet almost immediately after entering the subatomic world. It's Veb's who's that enables Scott Lang and his crew to understand the language of the quantum realm.
When Scott Lang and Cassie are brought to the Freedom Fighters settlement, they become surrounded by sentient beings who reside within the quantum realm. Several of these characters are nods to Marvel Comics and the MCU's history, including a group of beings whose heads correspond perfectly to the colors of 5 of the MCU's Infinity Stones: red for the Reality Stone, orange for the Soul Stone, green for the Time Stone, yellow for the Mind Stone, and purple for the Power Stone. Perhaps Thanos' atomization of the Infinity Stones in Avengers Endgame sent them hurling into the quantum realm.
Katie O'Brien debuted as Jentorra in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, one of the leaders of the Freedom Fighters working to bring Kong the Conqueror's reign to an end. In Marvel Comics, Jentorra is actually the queen of a planet in the microverse who ends up being displaced into the surface world.
Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania introduces the MCU's version of Modok, but with a twist. Instead of George Tarleton, head of advanced idea mechanics in Marvel Comics, Darren Cross, the villain from 2015's Ant-Man, became Modok in the MCU. While Ant-Man implied that Yellow Jacket hadn't survived, Quantumania revealed that Cross had survived, but was sent to the quantum realm. Cross' body shrunk unevenly, leaving him deformed, but with the help of Kong the Conqueror, the mechanized organism designed only for killing, Modok, was created.
While Scott Lang and his daughter Cassie are imprisoned in Kong the Conqueror's quantum realm lair, the villain brags about having fought and killed multiple Avengers during his lengthy conquest. Kong proclaims that they all blend together after a while, asking Scott if he's the one with the hammer, after learning of his Avenger status. This suggests that Kong has killed at least one version of Thor, or potentially Captain America from Avengers Endgame, during his self-inflicted war.
Kong the Conqueror's most iconic costume in Marvel Comics is his trademark green and purple armor, which he sports throughout Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. This, of course, isn't the only costume worn by Kong in the comics, as his many variants all don different outfits. However, he is most often seen in this armor, and so the comic-accurate depiction of it in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is brilliant to see.
Essentially, Kong the Conqueror needed Scott Lang to steal something for him to be able to escape the quantum realm. Therefore, years after leaving his life of crime behind, Scott had to perform yet another heist. Scott Lang's journey to becoming Ant-Man started with him performing a heist in Hank Pym's house, which has now come full circle, as Ant-Man was tasked with retrieving Kong the Conqueror's multiversal engine. In a way, all Ant-Man movies have featured at least one high-stakes heist.
In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the Scarlet Witch massacres Earth 838's Illuminati team one by one, including John Krasinski's Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic. Wanda appears to unravel Reed's body into ribbons, much like what happens to one of the probable Scott Langs during scenes set in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania's probability storm. In the MCU, Wanda Maximoff has the ability to affect probability, making her a Nexus being, so this is perhaps exactly what she used to destroy Reed Richards and what occurred to this particular variant of Ant-Man.
In 2015's Ant-Man, Scott Lang is helped into the Pym Tech building thanks to hundreds of ants working together to create a tower. This scene is called back to in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, as hundreds of Scott Langs come together in the probability storm to help the original Ant-Man reach Kang's multiversal power core. This is a strangely moving moment in Quantumania, showing all the Ant-Men working together as one, just as ants do.
When Kong the Conqueror finally shows his face to Janet Van Dyne and her family, he refers to Hope as Jellybean. This affectionate term is usually only used by Janet when speaking to her daughter, but Kang's use of the nickname shows the bond that he made with Janet when he was first exiled to the quantum realm. After all, the pair were friends before she realized who she was, and Kong had previously promised to bring Janet back to her daughter.
Loki Season 1 introduced the concept of multiversal variants to the MCU, describing the different versions of a character from alternate realities in the multiverse. However, while the MCU's Phase 4 dove into the multiverse following the events of Loki Season 1, the term variant had yet to be used in an MCU feature film. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania changes that, however, as Jonathan Majors Kong the Conqueror specifically uses the term when referring to the other versions of himself that exist across the multiverse.
Starting with Loki Season 1, Episode 1, the MCU has kept its visualization of the multiverse consistent. The same style of illustration used in Loki to explain the multiverse appeared again in Spider-Man, No Way Home, and returned again in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Kong shows Janet Van Dyne the flow of time and the infinite timelines that exist within the MCU's multiverse, very much like the line seen in Loki and Spider-Man, No Way Home, though he also shows the destruction of the multiverse's many branches in a sobering, menacing moment.
Kong the Conqueror's ship, in which the time-traveling villain keeps most of his technology, is a key part of the character's mythos in Marvel Comics. Kong the Conqueror's ship was present in Kang's two Marvel Comics debuts, one as Rama-Tut in Fantastic Four number 19 and the other as Kong in Avengers number 8. Just like in the comics, Kong could not use his chair and ship to go back home right away, with the difference that, in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, they had been compromised by Janet Van Dyne instead of being broken.
Incursions, deadly multiversal events in which two or more universes crash with each other and lead to their destruction, were name-dropped by Kong the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Kong explains how dangerous it will be if he doesn't leave the quantum realm, mentioning that there will be chaos and that incursions will happen. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness introduced incursions as a major new threat, and they are a key plot element from Marvel Comics' 2015 Secret Wars event, so could be paramount to the MCU's Phase 6.
During Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania's final battle scenes, Quaz, played by the Good Place's William Jackson Harper, telepathically deduces that the code for the drawbridge is 18,147. While this could seem like a random collection of numbers, Scott Lang made his first appearance in Marvel Comics in 1978's The Avengers number 181. As a civilian in Stark Industries, while Scott first suits up as Ant-Man, and Cassie Lang is first seen in 1979's Marvel Premiere number 47. This is a direct reference by Quaz in Quantumania, meaning the numbers weren't so random after all.
Cassie Lang goes giant, relatively, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania's final battle. While Cassie does have giant powers in Marvel Comics, from which one of her many superhero aliases, Giant Woman, comes, Cassie's giant transformation in Quantumania was a callback to Captain America, Civil War and Avengers, Endgame. Saying, "Please work," multiple times was exactly what Ant-Man did in Civil War's airport fight. Also, Cassie wanted some citrus fruits, though she wanted lime instead of orange slices. Her punching Modok while giant was similar to her father punching one of Thanos' Leviathan in Avengers, Endgame's final battle.
Cassie Lang becomes a superhero in Ant-Man and the Wasp by Quantumania, although she is not given an official superhero name, nor makes it official that she will continue to use the Pym particles and her own Ant-Man-like suit. Still, Cassie Lang was trained by Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne on how to use the Pym particles, and after her experience in the quantum realm, Cassie Lang will most likely return as a hero in the MCU. In Marvel Comics, she becomes Stature, and later Stinger, and operates as a member of the Young Avengers.
During the final battle of Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Scott Lang emerges from the shadows and uses a circular piece of metal as a shield, incredibly reminiscent of Captain America in the MCU. Ant-Man uses the shield to deflect bullets and eventually destroy Kang's ship, thwarting his plan of leaving the quantum realm. Throughout the MCU's Ant-Man franchise, Scott Lang has constantly spoken about Steve Rogers' Captain America, so this was a brilliant homage to the now-retired MCU hero.
The Council of Kangs debuted in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's mid-credits scene in a moment that perfectly recreates a panel from Avengers number 292. In Marvel Comics, the Council of Kangs is a gathering of multiple multiversal versions of Nathaniel Richards, including but not limited to Kong Prime, Immortus, Ramatut, and Scarlet Centurion. Similarly, the MCU's Council of Kangs is a reunion of multiple Kong variants from across the multiverse. While this scene introduces hundreds of Kong variants, the three primary variants are Immortus, Ramatut, and a version of the Scarlet Centurion, all portrayed by Jonathan Majors.
The time platform, typically used by Doctor Doom in Marvel Comics, made its first MCU appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, used by John Krasinski's Reed Richards as he enters the Earth-838 Illuminati chamber. The time platform reappears in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's mid-credits scene, used by the Kong variants to enter the Council of Kangs amphitheater. This references Kong and Reed's familial connection in Marvel Comics, as Kong is the descendant of Reed Richards' time-traveling father, Nathaniel Richards.
During Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's mid-credits scene, several Kong variants are seen entering the Council of Kangs amphitheater. One of these variants, unlike the others, is dressed in a smart suit and has an incredibly human appearance. This variant could be Mr. Griffin, the CEO of Kang Enterprises. Kang Enterprises was previously teased in Loki Season 1, and has been rumored to be the new owners of Avengers Tower, which was sold by Tony Stark way back in 2016's Spider-Man Homecoming.
Victor Timely, a Kong variant who hit in the early 20th century in Marvel Comics, living as a politician and inventor, appears in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's post-credit scene. It's important to notice that, in the comics, Victor Timely is Kong Prime, that is, the original Nathaniel Richards who first traveled back through time. It is unclear whether the MCU's Victor Timely from Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania will also be Kong Prime, or if he will be a different Kong variant entirely, but Loki Season 2 will expand on this story much further.
Loki and Mobius, the beloved TVA duo from Loki Season 1, return to the MCU in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's post-credits scene. Loki and Mobius were seen in the audience listening to Victor Timely's demonstration in the early 20th century. Considering that Loki Season 1 ended with a Kong variant taking over the TVA, it makes sense for Loki and Mobius to be worried listening to Victor Timely, although it isn't clear how much they already know about Kong the Conqueror. The duo and Victor Timely will return in October 2023's Loki Season 2.
Just the fact that Kong the Conqueror and his variant stories are introduced in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is a big enough setup for Avengers, the Kong Dynasty, but another Easter egg links Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania directly to Avengers, the Kong Dynasty. Kong mentions how he is about to unleash a dynasty of Kangs, a direct reference to the upcoming Phase 6 film. Kong Dynasty is also the name of a memorable 2001 Marvel comic story centered on Kong and his son, Marcus, attacking the citizens of Earth.